Thanks, Joanne. And it's my pleasure to be here with you this morning. For those of you who don't know me, I am the Director of Field Services for Multi-Material Stewardship Western. We operate a printed paper and packaging stewardship program here in the province of Saskatchewan. So I want to welcome you to the final frontier, the Fireside chat that is going to be the wrap up session for the conference, aside from some additional networking time following this session. I have with me both Christina Seidel and Frances Edmonds, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to both of them. I'll start with Christina. She'll be our interviewer this morning. And a few things I want to say about Christina. So first of all, we're lucky to have her attend this conference, I think, almost every year. And you can tell that Christina is engaged and effective at what she does. Over the years, I've really enjoyed listening to her questions, listening to what she has to say. And she's always looking for that next level of effectiveness in terms of what we're all doing. So we're really glad to have her with us. Christina holds a PhD in engineering management, a master's degree in environmental design, as well as a bachelor's in science and mechanical engineering. And she operates Sonavera International Corp., a waste reduction consulting firm, and is the current executive director, as most of you know her, of the Recycling Council of Alberta. Christina loves rural life, choosing to live on a farm near Bluffton, Alberta, where she and her family raise warm blood horses and enjoy many other outdoor activities. So Christina, welcome, and thanks for being our interviewer for this morning's sessions with Frances.
Thank you very much, Kelly. I'm really looking forward to this.
Absolutely, yeah. And we have the pleasure of having with us Frances Edmonds. And in her role as head of sustainable impact, Frances is responsible for driving business from sustainability leadership, focusing on Canadians' sustainable procurement practices. Frances is working to change how Canada buys, and that's a huge area for some environmental wins. So it's great to have you with us, Frances. She oversees HP Canada's full suite of corporate social responsibility programs, including strategic partnerships with key nonprofit organizations and an industry-leading volunteer program. And under Frances's leadership, HP became the most sustainable technology company in Canada in 2018. So congratulations on that milestone. Frances started her career with the UK government as an enforcer of environmental health and safety requirements, followed by her role as manager of environmental health and safety in Canada's chemical and pharmaceutical industries. Frances has a degree in environmental science from Bradford University in the UK, a postgraduate diploma in occupational health and safety, and is a Canadian registered safety professional. So with that, I want to thank you both to the session, and I know we're in for a real treat this morning. So I will turn it over to you, Christina and Frances. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Thanks, Kelly. Welcome, everybody, to this session. I'm really looking forward to this. And Frances, thanks so much for joining us. It's thrilling, actually, to be able to do this with you. It's funny, I was thinking back to when we've known each other a lot of years. I was trying to think back to when we actually met. And it's been so long that I couldn't pin down the exact time when we actually met, but we definitely have been working together in this space for a long time. I always really enjoy my conversations with you, as much as I'd love for this to actually be around a fire, a chat around the fire. It's kind of nice because we get to have a conversation and share it with 100 of our closest friends in Saskatchewan. So this is going to be great. So thank you, and let's kick this off.
Sure.
So we are going to largely frame this within a circular economy context, and I know a lot of people. It is the new lexicon for sure, but a lot of people are still struggling a bit with the term and the real meaning, because it is quite a different term than what we're used to using over the last few decades. So I wonder if you can kick this conversation off by just giving us your version of a high-level definition of circular economy, and maybe as much as the definition, speak a little bit about how it's different than what we currently and historically have done.
Excellent. Yes. Well, just to say thank you very much for the invitation to be here today. I'm very excited to be here, and really appreciate Kelly and Joanne for giving me the opportunity to speak to this. It's, as we've all evolved, it's great to be with a bunch of sustainability recycling professionals, because this is where the rubber meets the road and we can have a good conversation. And one of the things I don't put in my bio is that I am actually a Yorkshire woman from Yorkshire in England, and that tends to mean that I talk very straightforwardly. You get what you see is what you get, so be prepared, because I'm not going to mince words here. So for me, the definition of the circular economy, I focus on what we would call the inner loops. And most of us around the table here have built our careers on the outer loops. So I'm just going to focus on the inner loops. And for me, when I think about circular economy, it's keeping materials in use at their highest form of value for as long as possible. And I do a lot of guest lecturing on this. So one of the ways I like to explain it to people is to give people examples, because it's still a bit airy-fairy when you say materials in use at the highest form of value. What does that actually mean? So an average PC, if you can extend the PC's life by 2 years, you will reduce the carbon footprint by 30%. So think about that. That makes sense. It's logical that you're lowering carbon footprint. But what actually happens in practice to most PCs, and let's just take a business PC. You might use it for 3, 4, potentially 5 years. And then guess what? It gets put in a closet and people forget about it. They don't know what to do with it, really. They know it should be recycled eventually, but perhaps it has some data on it, so they're a bit concerned about it. So it gets put in a closet. It sits in that closet for 2, 5, 10 years, and then eventually it gets sent to recycling. Those dead years represent a lack of use, a lack of keeping it in use at its highest form of value. It's sitting there wasting resources. And so when we think about circular economy, there's a million different elements, but if you focus on that one example of extending product life, and how do we get to the point where we can extend product lives in a way that is meaningful and safe and protects data and all those things, it's about transitioning from buying a good to having access to the service of that good. So access over ownership. And those are the critical things. And I haven't even talked about recycling, because we've spent 30, 40 years raising a generation of Canadians who think that if you just recycle more, everything will be okay. Well,
yes.
And we really have to get away from that. So circular economy is not about recycling. It's about maximizing those inner loops of extending product life before you get to recycling, and then doing obviously a really, really good job on recycling.
That's amazing. Thanks, Frances. And I love your reference of the whole idea of something sitting around waiting to either be recycled or potentially used again as being really a waste of resources, because we don't normally think that way. So that's actually very helpful. Thank you.
And let me just jump in here, because we're running a program right now. I mean, post-COVID, what happened was a whole bunch of kids got sent home from school, some of whom had computers at home, and some of whom will do well and study, by themselves at home. But we've got a whole bunch of kids in Canada who have no technology at home.
Yeah, right.
And we have all of these computers sitting in closets and basements that could be being used by those kids. Right? Like that is, and this is our future, Canada. These are our youth. And we know if youth don't graduate from high school, all the social indicators will go downhill from there, right?
Right.
So we've got this generation of kids right now who've probably lost a good chunk of their school year. They're sitting at home with no computers to access stuff. Maybe they're working on a phone. Can you study on a phone? No. And then, school year in September is looking a bit dodgy too, right? So this access to technology, we have an absolute need from a societal standpoint And we need to get those computers. And so HP's actually stepped up, and this is not an advert for HP, but this program called HP Refresh, it's part of the circular economy by allowing up to 10-year-old PCs, so anything that's a Windows operating system. We're giving away free software. You just download it, stick it on a USB key, stick it in this up to 10-year-old computer. It completely erases what's on there. So you're taking away that fear of data privacy to HP's security standards, and then reinstalls a very light Linux operating system, a Chrome browser, and a Zoom client. So it's just good enough to get a kid online and studying. And I'd encourage everybody on the session today to go and look in your closets, in your business closets, and find those computers and do this refresh thing and get these computers to kids that really need them.
Fantastic. And that actually makes me wonder, does that kind of then speak a bit to the idea that seems to be an integral part of circular economy is also the sharing economy and sharing platforms, and the idea of sharing resources more? That somewhat speaks to that as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. When I talk to my sales team and they say, well, do we really want to encourage people to use a computer for 5 years? Then we're not going to have a sale anymore. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Business users need high performance technology that's not going to break down. Absolutely. What we're talking about is getting that technology back into use for a user who perhaps doesn't need such high performance or has nothing and could do with something. So it's that second and third life. And then how do we incent producers to produce technology? And of course, I'm using technology as the example here. Everybody has it.
Yeah.
How do we incent the producers to produce a product that is designed to have a second and third life, higher quality? And this is where we get to the purchasing piece, because the way we buy today on lowest price in the door incents all of the wrong design considerations. If you are trying to take every cent you can out of a complicated product, like a $1,000 PC, how do you do that? You have to make it with cheaper products that are less repairable, that are going to break down faster, and that's what our economic buying system does today. It incents the lowest quality that you can get away with.
Right.
So that's why I spend all of my time today focusing on procurement and how we change how we buy, so that we're sending the right signals into the marketplace.
And that's such an important point, because oftentimes procurement is listed as one of the primary mechanisms we can use to actually work towards a circular economy. So if that system is not doing what it should do in terms of incentivizing the right things, I guess that's definitely a failure. And I know we've talked before, Francis, about that they're actually, in fact, the current procurement practices seem to discourage innovation. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Absolutely. So we just got published last week some academic research looking at how our governments are doing in terms of integrating sustainability. This is not even circular. This is just straight sustainability into procurement. We looked at federal, provincial, and municipal bids over $1 million in all provinces, and looked at technology, construction, and large services purchases. And we analyzed 50 RFPs, and we looked at how well integrated is sustainability into those buying mechanisms. And the answer is not at all, really. Not even trying, really. So there's huge opportunity here. And a couple of structural things that are troubling with the way we do buying. Let's say we had people who really wanted to add in sustainability, and I know a lot of procurement people really do. They just have their hands tied to some extent. But this whole thing of requiring 3 bids to make sure in public sector purchasing that you're getting the best price. Well, if you're the only company offering the best sustainable solution because you've invested in it, and now you can't actually even bid on it because they can't set those specs because there's only one company who can meet it. Like what the system is set up to do is to design out excellence and leadership and moving the market, which is crazy, right?
Yes.
And then if we look at how you buy, I mean, we this transition from access to access from ownership. Our rigid financial systems, the dollar is king. The dollar is a proxy for the value we're getting in the door when we buy something.
Mm-hmm.
We're not even using that dollar to measure the total costs for the most part, right? Most people who buy technology today don't even build in what they're going to do at the end of its first life into that buying process. And it's not a surprise. Everything has an end of first life, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So why is that not a consideration? So we're not using the dollar to measure the total impacts in that total cost of ownership. And so we miss out on the opportunities even when using the dollar as the key measure, which of course
Right.
we'd like to see other things in the measurements there.
So because it's clear that that system is somewhat broken, what would you give us for some sort of high level ideas in terms of how do we fix it? How do we actually fix the procurement system so it encourages the right things, but at the same time still meets the other criteria that they're so adamant about, that, protecting the public purse and all of those things. So what is the answer, Frances?
So just poke at that a little, the fiduciary responsibility of a public servant to get the best value.
Yeah.
Right? And it's that best value conversation, because in some categories like vehicle purchasing, it's quite obvious that if you buy a gas guzzler, you're costing more. And that concept of total cost or best value over the lifetime of a product has seeped in, and we're starting to see in the odd category movement in that space. But if I look generally speaking, and why is it that we're actually behind, I believe, in Canada compared to our European colleagues for sure, and even to some of the US functions, I would say. I think the first thing is that there is this separation of church and state. There is the vendor is a dirty person. I do not want to be seen near them. I can't talk to them. I was giving a presentation on environmental employee engagement at a municipality, and when the IT, it was to the senior city staff, and when the IT person realized who I was and where I was from, he got up and walked out. I wasn't even talking about technology, right? It's that piece of, I can't, and it's been set up for good reason to prevent bad things like corruption from happening. But it actually now works against us, and particularly when you're talking about innovation and things like technology that change so fast. If you look at the idea of security in technology, let's take the example of printers. If you were using a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old RFP, which often happens, procurement people are busy and have too much to do, so they just take out the old one, scratch off the date, put the new date on, and off we go, right? That's literally what happens. Well, security from printers wasn't an issue 5 years ago. Today, it is a huge issue, right? And now you've missed out on the opportunity to protect your business or your organization because you haven't even talked with the vendor about what's new, what do I need to think about, blah, blah, blah. So like most sustainability problems, which are wicked problems, it requires everybody to come to the table with their individual skill sets. And I've been thinking about this a little. We are taught in silos. You're an engineer.
Yes.
Branched out and done some sustainability stuff. I'm an environmental health and safety person. That's what I was taught. I don't know anything about procurement. Right? How do I change how Canada buys when I know nothing about procurement? Well, it's about bringing people into the tent and understanding that everybody has something to contribute, which is what the circular economy is about, right? It is everybody stepping in with their expertise and learning to collaborate between businesses, between lines of business, between government, between nonprofits. Like, we all have to lean in and bring our skill sets together and understand how to take the best of what we all know to put it into advancing the process. That's a lot of talking for a simple question.
No, but I think it speaks to how this is actually a complex problem. Because we are challenged with we need to bring the procedures obviously up to date, and as you say, make the whole process a lot more collaborative, and that's hard to do, especially in large organizations.
Large organizations that have an expectation for accountability, transparency, and no corruption, collusion. I mean, look at what's going on in our federal government today. We can't even our poor students are sitting waiting for something to be delivered because somebody didn't recuse themselves from a conversation they should have recused themselves from, right?
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah. So because you work in this every day, are you seeing this movement starting to happen? Like, do you have, do you feel that we're actually headed in the right direction, or are we kind of still really stuck?
So I was quite depressed when I first started working and sort of lifting the rock and going, oh my God, it's really bad. I will admit to that because we're in friends here, right? I was on a call yesterday and I've helped coalesce a thing called the Coalition for the Advancement of Sustainable Procurement. So it's a pan-Canadian organization. We don't have any money to fund this, so I'm kind of holding it together with shoestrings or whatever. And we've got people from across the country. And one of the quotes, I'll just read this to you. There's a renaissance happening in procurement, which is great. I mean, it's starting to happen. But the quote that I got was that the procurement professionals are ill prepared to be ambassadors for this renaissance. They don't have the sustainability expertise. They're not change management people. They're hired to follow recipes and be really, really good at following recipes and dotting every I and crossing every T. That's what they're really good at. They're not hired to stick their head above the parapet and say, we need to do this because this is the right thing to do. Or to push for change in the process. Or to go to the other lines of business and say, hey, if you buy this today at this rate, this is how you're going to impact further down. That's they're not prepared, they're not trained. Our professional associations, for the most part, are not doing a good job in preparing our up-and-coming graduates for excellence and leadership in sustainability either. So we've got a bit of a deficit there, and it's going to take all of us to step up and try and help and change that.
So do you think the answer, Frances, is more about more training for the procurement professionals, or is it about them becoming part of a broader process that has more collaboration with other expertise?
So I think if we didn't have that big climate crisis wave about to crash over us, I would say it's training. I think Suzuki said it, a decade ago, if I'd started my career again, I'd have invested in education rather than lobbying and haranguing people and making nice movies, right? We know that education is at the root of everything, and that's why every new hire who comes into HP Canada gets 2 hours of training from Frances, which is the basics, right? I hand them their volunteer t-shirt and I give them 2 hours. It doesn't matter if they're the janitor or the CEO, they get the same training, and I made it mandatory. Nobody told me not to, so that's good.
Good.
But we have 10 years to fix climate crisis, right? We don't have time to do that. So, and a good example came up yesterday where, if you were going from, let's say you're a municipality, you haven't thought about this. Okay, so now we have to do this in a logical, streamlined fashion. We have to write a policy. Okay, how many people have to be involved in policy writing and implementation, right? 4 years go by before you've ever done anything on an RFP. Meanwhile, these RFPs for building bridges and whatever else it might be doing are going through that have 50-year implications. And you haven't changed a single thing in an RFP yet. So because of the climate crisis, I think we're going to have to accept a more of a test and learn approach that isn't necessarily the nice, tight change management process that we would all ideally like to go through, because we just don't have the time. We've squandered that time. We now have to focus on, let's just put a requirement in every RFP that if you want to do business with us, you have to have a science-based target for your own organization. You have to be disclosing your full carbon footprint to CDP or whomever. These are basics. In order to get a seat at the table to do business with us, that's a minimum, right? And just make it a requirement. We have set Paris targets as a country. We should be able to do this. Do you know how many companies in Canada have set science-based targets?
I'm guessing not very many.
13.
Oh, okay.
And we're in the decade of climate crisis.
Yeah.
So, we've tried EPR. It's done some good. It's not got us to where we need to be. What's the fastest tool we have and the most overlooked tool and the least used tool? It's procurement to get us to where we need to be. And I really think it is the only tool that has a hope in hell of getting us to where we need to be. But We can't just ask these poor procurement people who are, some of them are doing this stuff on the side of their desks, staying up till midnight, trying to, you know what it's like, right? We need to clearly state that if an organization does have sustainability goals, the fastest, most effective way to meet them is to use procurement as the tool.
Right. No, and that's a really important message, I think, because a lot of times we will skip over procurement and jump to other things.
And you know why? Because it's hard.
Right.
Procurement are walled off. They're like this department that are protected so bad things
Yes.
don't happen. And, and I would have been guilty of this myself, as a sustainability professional working more inwardly focused. What do you do? These hard people to get to, and they're typically under the CFO who, don't come near my people. Right? Policy, throw it over the wall and job done. That's actually not done at all, right? We
Right.
know that even with the best policies, universities are a great example. Best policies, they're teaching this stuff. They have the expertise in-house. What actually comes out in the RFPs, no better than the average public sector.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of crazy. Good piece of news, I'll just give you a number. We have started disclosing in our annual sustainability report how much business is coming in as a result of our sustainability leadership. And so last year we saw a 69% increase in the business that is coming as a result of our leadership, $1.6 billion in business as a result of our sustainability leadership. So it's happening in other parts of the world.
Right.
People are, there's two reasons for disclosing that information. One is it gives our board of directors air cover for doing even more investments into sustainability at HP. It sets the bar for our competition to be sitting up and looking. This year we made the announcement that we have the world's most sustainable PC portfolio. And when we stepped up to that pedestal, we said we want our competitors to knock us off that.
Right.
Right? Because it's a journey and you only get there by chomping at the bit. But you can only go so far ahead of your competition and in the investments that you're making before you're suddenly uncompetitive, because now you have additional costs associated with this. And let's just talk about plastics for a minute, because we're sort of near and dear to all of our hearts. HP set a goal to have 30% post-consumer recycled content across our entire print and PC portfolio by 2025. This year, we just announced eliminate 75% of single-use packaging, plastic packaging in our packaging by 2025. We're so big that is, 30% doesn't sound like much, but the best data I can get is that the average post-consumer recycled content in electronics today is about 2%. So to go from 2% to 30% is huge, given the volume of products that we're selling. We didn't even know how we're going to meet that. We only know that we have assurance of supply because we've done 15 years of working with the Canadian company, the Laverne Group, to make plastics circular. But the change management associated with that and the insurance that, our customers, we've had to work with UL to get certification for the recycled content, just to get us to where we need to be so that we can deliver on what customers want. But no customer is asking for recycled content in their products ever at all.
Right.
So now we've invested all this money to do this, and Adele, Lenovo, and Asus, whatever, they're not doing any of this work. Their price in the door is going to be cheaper.
Yep. Yeah, that's always been an issue, hasn't it? That really, the really progressive companies kind of put themselves at a competitive disadvantage. Mm-hmm. And that's unfortunate unless we're all stepping up to the plate and making those procurement choices, then that inevitably happens.
Right. And, there are more reasons than straight, sales. But at the end of the day, in a capitalist economy, you have to make a profit to stay in business. So there's lots of ancillary benefits, like the employee engagement that goes with this kind of work. It's phenomenal. I don't find it hard to justify internal programs that will benefit our customer from a sustainability standpoint, because everybody at HP is aligned on we're here to make a difference. We're here to make an impact, right? And yeah, we've got to make a profit, but here's all the other things we could be doing, and we could do so much more, right? And the power of procurement, if we could set it up in a way that, I want to buy computing power or printing power. Tell me how you can deliver this and at what cost, and what are the sustainability benefits you could accrue as you do this. Could I have a basic recycling program? Could I have a more, a white glove recycling program? Like what benefits can you give me? And asking the vendors to come back to you rather than saying, I need X, Y, Z, A, B, C, compete on price. Right? That's really what we do today.
So again, it's like you actually want to foster that innovation and reward the innovation through the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay.
That's how our capitalist economy works. Let's face it, business is really good on delivering what your customer wants. That's how we survive. So if a customer asks for better things, or even says, I'm asking for this today, but tomorrow I'm going to ask for this, so just be ready, sending that signal into the marketplace. It's very powerful.
Great. Well, and that kind of brings us to a question actually that came from one of the attendees. So there's the whole issue of roles and who really should be doing what and who's more likely to lead us towards a circular economy. There's a lot of assumptions that government should be leading, but when we actually look at what's happening out there, it's really companies like yours that are leading. So who do you see as really providing more leadership in terms of moving our society as a whole towards a circular economy? What's going to come from government? What's going to come from the private sector in your mind?
I don't see anybody stepping forward in terms of leadership. We've made the decision to take our entire business circular, and we've set that as a guiding principle for everything that we do. And that is a huge thing to transition from selling boxes to selling services, for instance, right? That's an internal whole bunch of stuff. It's a collaboration. Whenever I ask any of our teams what's the best thing to help it's collaboration. So everyone has a role to play. And, I am sitting on the, so Environment and Climate Change Canada commissioned the CCA, which is the Canadian Council of Academies, their top research arm, to write a report on the opportunities for the circular economy in Canada. And I'm actually sitting on the expert panel. So, by next year, hopefully by the World Circular Economy Forum, we'll have a report out on that, giving us some ideas on the opportunities for circular economy. But in my 30 years as a sustainability professional, it's amazing to me when I think back, really it comes down to individuals, right? It's I am going to take the leadership and I don't care anymore. Time is too short. I just have to do what my heart and my conscience is telling me. And, if people don't like it, whatever, I'll go around them. Sometimes we don't have the time to sit down and do things in the way we might have done a decade ago. We just have to, as individuals, step up and say, this is the right thing to do. I understand it, and I am going to push wherever I can. You will always face negativity and pushback. But there's a sense today, post-COVID, that we need to build back better. And I think, when we see what's happening to our kids, and there's, people are choosing not to have kids because of the climate crisis.
For sure.
People are getting married in carbon neutral weddings. Like you would never thought of that as even being a thing, right? So we have the impetus. We have had this giant reset button set, and it's up to everybody on the call today. You can make an impact, but I'd challenge you to stop thinking about changing a recycling bin or whatever it is. Think big, think where the footprint is, and go after it as fast as you can. And don't take no for an answer. Just don't. We don't have time.
Brilliant. No, that's great. And I love that message that really leadership ultimately comes from individuals, because they're the inspired ones. I think that's fantastic. And that kind of then leads me into the next question, which again was actually on the chat function. One of the things, I think, this whole issue with procurement and how it ends up all coming down to dollars and cents. I mean, isn't that just the big picture version of what happens every day when an individual walks into a store? So how do we get individuals to behave a little bit more responsibly in terms of their own individual procurement? Because we know for the most part that is not happening.
Well, and I had to do a little check myself on this one. I didn't come from a wealthy family, and as an immigrant at whatever age here, you know, struggled to make a living for myself, and I prided myself on buying the cheapest, right? That's what I did. And I actually had to catch myself and go, oh, cheap isn't always best, is it, Frances? And whether it's clothing, I mean, I've been a vegetarian for years. I cycle everywhere. Like I try really hard not to fly. Thank God for COVID. Like, you've done all the big things, and then you stop and you go, oh no, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff I'm doing that is not actually consistent with the values that I'm trying to espouse from a business perspective now. And so absolutely practicing what you preach. But come back to that education thing again. Most people in Canada don't know that plastic is made from oil. Right? That's how pathetic our sustainability education system is. And that's the reason I sit on the board of Learning for a Sustainable Future that works in the K-12 space. Teachers don't feel comfortable teaching climate change because they were never taught it. They don't have the tools and the resources. So there's so much to fix. So we just have to go at the bits we can. And the irony of sustainability education in Canada being funded by businesses because school boards are not doing it. Right? LSF is funded through businesses, basically. I know because I'm on the fundraising committee. So, and there's an interesting, we did a climate literacy survey through LSF. You can go and check that out online. Fascinating data showing that, we've got our youth to the point where they understand climate change is real, that it's man-made, but because they've had so little education in it, they think there's nothing we can do about it. Now imagine the crisis and angst that's going to create in our youth. Like, that's just not okay, right? So step up, teach yourself the basics, get carbon literate, and then it doesn't matter where you are in an organization, you can make an impact, but think of the biggest impact you can make. I was talking to a guy who works in a software company yesterday, and he's going, well, we don't even have composting bins in the office. I said, don't even talk to me about composting bins. What's your business? If you can change the way your customers are thinking about sustainability, and that's where your impact is, go after that. That's your biggest impact, right?
Right. No, that's fantastic. So, Frances, are you okay if we just get a little bit more personal for a minute?
Of course.
I think everybody would be really interested because, I mean, you've got all these visionary ideas. You're leading the charge. I think we'd be really interested in hearing how you ever landed in this space, and even looking in your bio at your head of sustainable impact. Like, I swear you're the only company that has that term, the head of sustainable impact. I mean, that's amazing. So how did you actually land here? Tell us that story.
Mm-hmm. Well, you heard in the bio, I have a degree in environmental science. That was, and when I graduated, I'd already worked pre-university in labs, testing water and stuff. And I knew I wasn't a lab person. I'm not a do the same thing every day person. So I looked around and I took the first job that seemed interesting, which was really a Ministry of Labour inspector. So going into every different kind of industry and business and trying to figure out what's wrong from a management structure. In those days, to protect health and safety, but I just built in environment stuff too, because it was the solution to pollution was dilution. They would just pump stuff outside. So no, let's change processes. So learning quickly how to deal with different management styles in everything from steel mills to backyard garages to whatever. Right? Then I came to Canada and worked in the chemical and pharmaceutical industries as environmental health and safety managers, and took a sideways move to HP, which I would never have thought I was doing. But I had a girlfriend who went to HP and said, you don't know what kind of a company this is. She wouldn't shut up until I applied for the job. So I took the job, sideways move. And it was actually EPR legislation that got me on this tack of working more outside of HP than inside of HP. And I actually worked in implementing EPR for electronics across the country for 6 or 7 years. And I got really tired of not being able to push higher standards. When you work in industry collaboratives and with governments, you're not pushing the highest standards, you're pushing the lowest standards that you can get away with. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. And I said, okay, I can't take this anymore. We have to do better. And I went to my boss and said, I need to do something different. I can't do this anymore. So we started to build this concept of creating enough CSR programs that we could step up and say we're Canada's most sustainable technology company, And then when I got a new boss and she came in and she said, well, that's fantastic, Frances, but it would appear our customers don't care. And she said, I'd like you to change that. So it's a bit of a vision from having a CEO who really gets this stuff and understands that business has an opportunity to tackle transformational change in Canada. That it's not up to government or NGOs, because you don't have the power. Business has more power than they deserve. I absolutely admit that. So let's use it for good.
Right.
And so she gives me the tools and the resources and the brand. Go at it, see what you can do, and gives me permission to fail. And that's probably one of the biggest things. And I stand on the back of giants. I don't have to write our CSR report. I don't have to do the CDP report. I don't have to measure how much waste and recycling and all those other things we're doing, because I'm outwardly focused and I'm trying to lead. You know, if you're doing a really good job on sustainability, you want to win business so you can do more. And that's really what I'm trying to do today. And you know, have the benefit of all of the expertise and brilliance of HP people behind me that enables me to go out and try completely new things. And it's about collaboration again. Can't do this by myself at all.
Great, thank you. So just to broaden out a little bit beyond procurement, then there are obviously other pieces that are important as well. And we recognize, I mean, not all companies are like HP and really are leading the charge. So what are the other things that need to come together and happen for us to move towards a circular economy? And specifically, how do we get other companies to do like what you're doing? How do we get them inspired? Because right now, most companies are actually not inspired to do these things, to move more towards sustainability and produce better products. So how do we make that happen?
So, I mean, we've got that twin thing of the pull in the market from procurement. We've got the internal thing, which is, you know, I forget who it was that told me, it might have been you, Christine, you know, we've got industries that are having difficulty attracting the brightest and the best because they're seen as dead or dying industries, right?
Right.
You know, at the end of the day, a company is really the sum of its people. And if you want to attract the brightest and the best, that, you know, my hiring managers are telling me all the time, it keeps coming up, Frances, you know, you need to tell me more about the sustainable impact stuff so I can tell people in interviews, right? And the companies that are going to survive are the ones that are going to innovate. You know, we're looking at this fourth industrial revolution. You know, the whole COVID thing has shown us, you know, that shortening of supply chains and the necessary changes that we have to make. 3D print has been really taking off as a way of shortening supply chains. So there's huge opportunity in innovation, and it's not that hard to get started. And I think it's a little bit more about allowing people to come up with the ideas. A lot of what we're going to have to do, I mean, the technology's there. It's about implementing it, and it's about getting people to change the systems that they have, just because we've been doing it for too long in the same way, right? Don't think of anything as fixed in stone anymore. Let's think about what can we change, what can we tweak, how could we do this differently? And I always think of, you know, really what we get today is the way we run procurement. It results in a mini tragedy of the commons within an organization, because we're failing to measure all of the impacts throughout an organization. So I get this all the time. Customers buying based on lowest price in the door. Somebody else is paying the electricity bill, so they buy a non-Energy Star rated product, right? So now the energy costs are going up, but the person who's doing the purchasing decision doesn't get to see that cost or feel the impact of it. Right. And then the janitors, the person who has to deal with the end of life stuff, has nothing to do with any, you know, the IT or the facilities or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's because we're running these silos and people aren't talking. So understanding how your organization works and what are the levers and pushes and pulls you can do to make the changes that are necessary, but just be brave, because we don't have time. So step up and be brave and hire the people who want to be brave.
I so love that message, that the successful organizations are going to be the really innovative ones. So innovation leads to success, but you're only going to be successful at being innovative if you get the best people, and they're going to only want to join an organization that has these kind of principles. I just think that is such a fantastic message, and I don't think that's often relayed. So I'm going to take that with me. I absolutely love that concept. That's a really, really good idea. So I'm just going to bring you back now to, can I ask about municipalities? So what is the role that municipalities can play? Because I know there's quite a movement towards circular cities now, and even like the RCA has a project on circular cities. But what's your experience, and what would you suggest is the role that municipalities can play and should play going forward?
Well, I think really the rubber meets the road at the municipality, literally and figuratively, right? So
Right.
I think they're going to be our champions. I think they're going to be the ones that push us forward. Couple of pieces though, which again is, how do you get innovation to happen? I was looking at a job posting recently, and it was, a reasonable salary, 35 hours a week, they want somebody to walk on water to deliver on this job function. And I'm thinking, who works 35 hours a week anymore? In this kind of a job, and, admittedly it's a passion, right? So I do a lot of that. But there's almost like an old guard that has to be moved along for the younger, different thinking, more urgent. But we're seeing municipalities step up, and I went to witness the city of Mississauga vote on their climate change plan. And Bonnie Crombie, the mayor, stood up and she said, well, we've got this, we've now agreed to, and it was a unanimous vote, just for the record. We've got this vote, by 2050 we'll be, whatever it is, carbon neutral. We said, but that's not ambitious enough. The mayor actually stood up and said, that's not ambitious enough. So there was some leadership coming from the top there, and I really do like Bonnie. How does that trickle down? So they had me in, and I went to talk to their green team leaders as the sort of the next step of this. We've got the resolution passed. We have a plan. Frances, can you come and inspire everybody to do something? And it's really, yes, we all now have to step up and take responsibility. It's not somebody else's job anymore. It is all of our job. And fiscal responsibility as a municipality is not the only responsibility. You have poverty reduction, you have youth empowerment, you have, and these things are all interconnected right at the municipal level. I think one of the problems is that we're not investing in the training, the metrics. I know we have a question about metrics at some point. We don't have all of the pieces of the puzzle yet to get us to where we need to be, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't just take the first step and then the next step. And these are the things that will come, right? Sustainability is really still a relatively young science thing, right? And it's evolving continuously.
So is that partly about, like, you've made a couple of references to, let's just start, we need to just start doing it. We're running out of time. But we seem to be pretty risk averse in our society. So I guess part of it is being willing to take a chance, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's two pieces to that. One is actually taking a risk and something failing, but the other one is having the courage to do that risk taking, right? It's a mindset. So you have to feel that you have the backing of the organization, that if it does fail, it's okay, because at least you tried. So in HP, we have a thing, it's called fail fast. Prototype, get on, do it. If it's not working, that's okay. We'll abandon it, but just do it quickly so we can move on to the next one, right? And that's, for an innovation, for a technology company, innovation is your lifeblood. You absolutely have to be there. And there's some training, but it's a philosophy thing, And I'm probably, what's the word? I always joke that I have a very long noose to hang myself on, right? And one day I'm going to really hang myself, but at this point I don't care, right? I'm just got to get out and get it done. And, I'm a driver and that's okay. But my boss has my back, and, she'll just leave Frances alone. She's doing the good stuff. Let her get on with it.
That is so fantastic. Yeah. So you actually mentioned metrics, and I do need to ask this question because oftentimes this is a bit of a barrier for trying to come up with new approaches. Is how do we actually measure? How do we monitor? How do we know when we're being successful in terms of working towards a circular economy? Is there not that there's a given set of metrics already, but how do we develop those metrics and how do we monitor our progress?
So at risk of breaching my confidentiality thing, this is something that's being talked at the CCA panel that I'm on, because we're recognizing that we don't have the metrics. And I was kind of thinking back to who have I been working with this. So you're familiar with Corporate Knights and their Global 100 metrics, and they also put out a Clean 200 listing, both of which we're on. So they're measuring percentage of revenue from clean products, which is a start, right? But it's not, and it seems to be that most of the metrics today are on dollars again, and really it's material flows that we in this room are all concerned about, right? We've cut our lifeblood on that. But can we measure that circularity? And no, we can't. And I'm not a metrics person, so I don't think I'll ever be involved in fixing this. But maybe some modeling around material flows, which we in this room all have expertise on.
Right.
So I challenge you all. This could be something that would be really helpful in the move to circularity. Is how do we get better metrics? And we've been having these conversations around definitions, and I don't actually care about definitions. It's irrelevant to me. I think we have the concept. We know what we're trying to do. Whether it includes this word or that word, I don't care. But metrics, and we know what gets measured gets managed. So in business, how are we going to facilitate that? And today, what do? We measure hazardous and non-hazardous waste and recycling and diversion from landfill if we're lucky and we're not a US company, right? So how do we do better than that? That's and standardize in a way that is also not adding costs to the system just to measure garbage, quote unquote, that adds value. We do a lot of that in EPR of adding extra metrics without any incremental environmental benefit, I would say. And we need to keep our eye on that prize of what we do has to make sense and not increase costs. A good example is the recycled plastic piece. We've seen reports because of the drop in oil prices that even recycled plastics producers are now sneaking virgin plastic in there because it's so much more cheap than the recycled plastics, right? So how do you get a standard that verifies for buyers, for instance, that this really is recycled content without adding extra burden of cost to that recycled plastic, which is already disproportionately priced to virgin plastic?
Right.
A bit of a conundrum there. So yeah, I don't have an answer on the solution for that, but I don't think it should stop us from getting started. I've said many times, and there are some very smart people out there. The finance people are pretty good at a lot of things. We just need to give them a different pair of glasses to look at things through, and they'll come up with something.
But I guess one of the points being that when we're measuring things, we really need to measure what's actually important instead of just measuring things for the sake of measuring.
Oh, what's easy to measure? Yeah, I mean that's often the default too, right? Adding value.
Okay. A couple of times in the chat, I noticed that there's been the term of asset management has come up a few times. Maybe you can just speak to a lot of organizations pay attention to asset management. They have they have groups that deal with asset management. How do we make sure this gets rolled properly into asset management?
So if we think about this fourth industrial revolution that's coming along, where we have technology able to, I'm going to stick to my technology bubble, right? Technology can help us with the metrics here because we can ping devices, and devices, like if you look at HP's Instant Ink, the world's fastest growing business to consumer play in the circular economy, where the printers are telling us, okay, I'm getting low on ink, and they automatically order to get the ink shipped to the customer. The customer doesn't have, they just pay for a subscription service for printing, basically. That information technology, advanced technology, artificial intelligence, we can start to leverage that to take the hard work out of asset management, right? It shouldn't be hard work. We should be able to track by technology where everything is, and use predictive analytics then to tell us when things are going to come to end of life or whatever. Let's take that hard work out of it, and let's think about what's really important here and why are you doing the asset management. And if you were really paying attention to asset management from a product life extension perspective, then we're getting the circularity piece that we need out of that.
Okay.
Right? And so that there's a feedback loop of, oh, I bought these cheap, crappy things that are not repairable. Now I'm having to replace them more often.
Right.
if there's a total cost of ownership conversation for the next time the RFP is written, I use that feedback data into here, and now I can make a better total cost of ownership conversation. So I think those two things are tightly tied, if that made sense.
Oh, that's fabulous. Thank you. So I want to leave you with a question that has always bothers me, having been around for too long. I've seen it happen too many times. I want to ask the greenwashing question, because when the terminology circular economy, we saw this happen with zero waste. The zero waste got co-opted by a number of organizations that claimed that they were zero waste when they were far from it. Do you think, is that going to happen with circular economy too? Because everybody seems to be really interested in it, and how do we try to mitigate that?
So I thought a bit about this question, because I think the average Canadian has a sense when they're being greenwashed, right? They get uncomfortable, but they're not quite sure why. So the spidey sense goes, which then, as we know, debases every claim that's out there. So we got a problem with greenwash. So stamping it out when you see it is very important. But for me, the two things is to become carbon literate. If we've got people who don't even know plastic is made from oil, like, you get that stupid question, well, can recycled plastic possibly have a lower footprint than virgin, right? Like, how can that
right?
Right? And you go, well, so that carbon literacy is really important. Sticking to standards. So, at HP, hopefully you will never see this, but we can't use the term environmentally friendly.
Great.
Told us it doesn't mean anything, and a product that's made out of materials and uses energy and paper cannot be environmentally friendly. It can be less environmentally bad. That's what we aim to be, but so there's some terminology. Then there's the going back to the eco-label concept, right? We do need more eco-labels, but eco-labels are a baseline. They, EPEAT, for instance, pretty comprehensive eco-label. Just got updated last year for the PC side of the house. We were the first company to register EPEAT Gold products, and we did our little happy dance because we put a lot of work and effort into being able to do that.
Yeah.
And we go, yay, we won the challenge, blah, blah, blah. And then the Green Electronics Council, the organization that runs EPEAT, put on a webinar and told all of their buyers to buy EPEAT bronze.
Okay. Got it.
It's back to the buying, having three companies be able to bid on something. So, so use of eco-labeling, but they again add cost, right? So eco-labels have to be balanced, I guess. And then paying attention. So if we define buying sustainably or circularly, it's about buying the most sustainable product from the most, or a good or service from the most sustainable company. And I think we forget that company piece. And quite frankly, we let branch plant companies off the hook entirely. We let them get away with it by riding on the coattails of their parent company's performance and allowing them to do nothing in country.
Okay. No, that's great. Thank you, Frances. That was fantastic. What a great car. I can't believe the time's already over. I thought an hour was going to be a long time, but it wasn't long at all. This has been such a pleasure, Frances. I've really enjoyed it. We have to do this in person sometime as soon as things get better. And I'm sending you a virtual hug. Okay, and I'm going to turn it back over to Kelly to wrap up. Thanks, Frances.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I think that was such a great dialogue. There's really not much left to say other than thank you both for contributing to such a great session for the ReForum.